Yo, 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 what is going on, IK Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and today we are back again, bringing you some more of that high quality IK goodness. Today, we are going to be touching on a very interesting topic, something that we have talked about a little before, but really wanted to take an opportunity to expand on what I really think is something important to know. And how to be able to kind of discern these trends early on. And so the topic we're going to be covering today is how every new server, every new kingdom in any and every kingdom builder, even though specifically we're focusing on IK, always will run the risk and the highest percentage chances of going in the direction of mega alliances and just kind of general power imbalance. And we're really going to be focusing and talking today about why that happens, how to pay attention to notice the trends, and then what are some of the solutions, right, that any kingdom, any server can do to try and prevent this, right? And this is, of course, only if you really want to at the end of the day, right, or if you're in a position to do it. Now, before we get started, as always, make sure you guys sub, like, ring that notification bell, and of course, if you want to join and be a part of our conversation, you can hit up our Discord, which you'll find in the pinned comment and description down below. Okay. So let's first start off by kind of highlighting and giving you some psychological context along with how certain mechanics and probably more importantly systems are in the game that will trend in this direction. Now the first one here is going to be taking a look at probably one of the most obvious, I don't really want to call it an eyesore, but something that it just shows you, right, that there is this kind of ladder to climb. And that would be the leaderboard. Now, you can see from here, right, this is our 142 Scout. This is the newest server currently. And if we just go to our Alliance power ranking, you can see here that for the most part, the alliances are not really far apart in power, right? I mean, there is a little bit of a spread if you look at 2 to 3 and then 1 to 2, right? The bigger spread here is 2 to 3, right, where you're kind of almost at 700K. And then you have 1 to 2 here, right, which is nearing about 600K. But then you have this kind of evening out portion where you'll find it pretty much finally starts probably once you get to 5. And then you'll see here, right, everything is really close. With that in mind, now let's take a look, and we will look at I think I had 140 that we looked at before, right? Yeah, actually, you know what? We'll go to 138 so I can show you a little bit of a different one. But the important thing to notice here is that a leaderboard in and of itself will somewhat motivate, but almost instigate the idea of trying to be top dog, right? Number one, if you will. And there will always be some alliances out there, however many, that just feel that way in general, right? Where they want to be the strongest. And that can vary, right? You can look at it as the overall leaderboard. You can look at it as the top dog per faction. And because of this, even if you just look at the faction power individually, you'll notice there are some decent spreads, right? And this server is not that old, right? This is the 6th, I think, newest server, or 6th oldest server now. I probably should say 6th youngest server. That's a better way to put it. And as the yawn tears are coming out. But you can see here that there is a little bit of a power gap starting to form, right, as we kind of get to an older server. And you'll see here, right, almost 2 mil. We go to green, right, 1.7, 1.6. We go to blue, right, what is this, 2.4? So things to just pay attention to. Then we look at the overall boards, right, and you can see kind of blue-red, but then you got green. When you compare green with 1, right, you're nearing a 3 mil gap. And again, this is because some players will want to just always move up the leaderboards. Others will, when they find opportunities to maybe leave the alliance, or if they're a free agent, or if they're just coming in, right, they'll try and join, right, the highest ranked alliance that they'll be able to. And this doesn't necessarily every single alliance or every single player will, but you will have a portion of players that will kind of abide by this thought process. And so that's first and foremost. Second is that players in and of themselves will join just by default the most, I'm not sure if I want to say easiest, but they will fill into, right, either the highest or just the most available or open alliance that they can join, right? Like, you would rather try and join a strong open alliance because you can get into it immediately than rather kind of apply and wait that time out. Because of this, one of the things you're going to start noticing, and now you look at this, right? So we go 4 servers deeper, right? 138, now we're 134. And you can see as we kind of go from a young server to a little bit of an older server, but still young, you're starting to notice the power imbalance, right? The gap here that is widening, right? And you can look at this 26 right now. It's kind of, I mean, you're almost at 5 mil now. Here, you're almost at 4. And then here, right, you're at what, 3.4, nearing 3.5, right? So the gap is getting wider here. And that's mainly because when and this is kind of like what we talked about in the beginning, right? When in one of my other videos, where when you are joining a new server, you are playing with just other individuals, right? That you don't know, they don't know you. And all of these things are factoring together, where you have new players that are joining alliance, new players that are leading alliances, and everyone is pretty much kind of just out for themselves, right? Not that they're doing it in kind of an ill-intended way, but just by default, right? Because no one knows each other, right? They're trying to join any alliance that they can to get in, just like some might be deciding to start an alliance, and you're trying just to kind of get in as early as you can. And so some of the challenges here on why you see these things happening, right, and how that affects it is that, well, and before I even kind of get to some of the what some of the after effects are of that, or I should say, sorry, some of the solutions and kind of how you can help that out, right? Let's talk about some of the effects of what can happen from that. So let's say that we expand this a little bit more, and let me show you an example here on server 16. So an example here would be to show that when you finally get to like an older server, I'll actually show you 3 examples here of older servers. You can see on 16, shout out to, sorry, that's my late night voice. And you'll see here that, right, there is a pretty steep, right, imbalance where, right, you got 202, 167, like, again, right, this is, what, 40, 35 mil, right, 34.5, still a pretty decent margin. And then you look at 2 to 1, right, it's half of that. And then here, we'll show you a few more here. And I want to give, I really want to use these servers as examples, because this kind of shows just one side of what the after effects are and what they can be. Is that when you are kind of going along, right, most servers will kind of anticipate, or I should say attempt to anticipate and think that things like server managing is, or I should say server merging is the appropriate course of action. And you look at server 16 and you look at a Woo and DD, right? Those are alliances that probably did a couple merges, right? And then for any players that came into those servers, right, to join those alliances specifically, which again, probably the most marketable thing about those kinds of servers, very similar to what you would find here on S9, right? Again, where it's one alliance. And something of note is that when you look at server 9 and server 11, right, with BXS on top, right, a good portion of those players, and I'm sure a few more might end up doing it as well, but a good portion of those players left, right? They joined 57. And that was mainly because they felt like they didn't have a lot of activity there when it came to participating in KVK, and I'm sure for other reasons as well. And from that point, you kind of have to look at what happened, right? What caused that? Now, the majority of time, right, 99.99% of the time, is that servers are really just kind of in general being mismanaged, right? And mismanaged, you could say mismanaged, you could say a lack of management, you can say just not knowing what to do next, right, for the server of the kingdom. And it kind of usually falls into one of those few categories, right, when it comes to also factoring in on why you see things like mega alliances trending, why you see the power imbalances trending, because it takes a lot of work, right? If you never did any work when it came to try to balance out alliance power, this is just the trend that it would go in, right? Because of some of the reasons I mentioned, and then because of what you will find within servers, right, on them looking to try and manage, try and merge first rather than recruit first, right? This is one of the things that you'll find happening in servers that factors into why you see, so many mega alliances, so to speak, on why you'll find, and what I should say, not only just kind of mega alliances, but the kingdoms themselves trending in that direction, right? Depending on how far along they are, right? I've only shown you a couple examples. Now, when it comes to solutions, right? I think a part of it is, one, are you someone who is okay? Do you want to play in a kingdom or a server that kind of has that? Do you want to help out and see maybe if there's a way that you might be able to assist in that? And very similar here, right? You'll see BXS on 11, right? Again, big power imbalance. And so these are things that can really be damaging to server health if you just don't know what to do, right? And, a funny saying, even though it may not necessarily say a lot at the time, but, you don't know what you don't know. And this is one of the things I really try and kind of hammer across to, and more so just explain, right, and try to educate, right, especially for projects that I run. One of the big things that we do in my projects is we're very big on education, right? I'm very big on sharing information, sharing processes, teaching, coaching, right? Giving people knowledge and tools that they just didn't have before, right? Because they, never have kind of managed servers, so to speak, like I have, and I'm sure some others have as well, where they just may not know what to do next, right? They don't know what the next step is or what the next action is that they have to do in their kingdom. And so I think it's funny because that's one of the trends I notice is that's why you'll kind of see players and, kings or queens or leads thinking that, the answer is to try and merge first, rather than recruit first. And it's just such a big impact on having more of a net negative for server health when it comes to keeping high player activity and then having high retention. That I think these people probably feel it does or it doesn't in those cases. Now, some of the solutions I think that servers and kingdoms can do is, like I said, I think a very important thing to try and avoid that. And let me just kind of talk about one more after effect before I really get to the solution part. Is that another area we didn't talk about is that, like, let's say you're in this server, for example, right? Let's say you have one alliance that is just a cut above the rest. Most likely, this alliance is probably going to have a big advantage and most likely consistently win or have the highest chance to consistently win all of the AVA or alliance events that come in the kingdom, along with possibly prioritizing having maybe as another point, right, the best cities and the most buffs. These are all things that can be a turnoff, right? These are just some things. Let me not say all, but some things that can be a turnoff to other alliances, other active players that play there, right? If you're a player and you're someone who enjoys participating in alliance versus alliance events because you want to try and compete with other alliances, you're going to enjoy that more when you're in a situation where any alliance can win in an AVA event, rather than one alliance wins it the majority of the time, if not all the time. That can be a turnoff for you as a player wanting to participate, to overinvest, to continue engaging in that event, right? And then also to potentially motivate others to engage and participate. So these are just some things, but now let me briefly talk about, all right, what are some of the solutions? So some of the solutions to this, first and foremost, really has to start early on in the kingdom's life. It's very difficult to kind of get on board with this idea later on because usually habits have kind of settled in. The way that leadership or management in that kingdom or server probably approaches things has kind of settled in, right? So they're kind of fine with the status quo for the most part. It's kind of very difficult to kind of change that, kind of sustained dynamic that kingdom or server is already in. Now, right? Because they kind of have to break out of the mold. Now, if it's a newer server, right, you can do things like, setting your standards early, setting your goals and your policies early, so that way you'll be able to put your kingdom in a direction early, and you can find out, who is interested in staying, who are the people that are going to leave that you probably would rather have leave than stay, hopefully for the most part, because they might just do more harm than good. And it also allows for you to start getting to a point where, after identifying the players or groups / alliances that are going to stay, then you can really start kind of moving on to your next phase of organization, right? So the early stage, I think, is extremely important when it comes to trying finding solutions. And then number two, I think having to try and get all the alliance leaders or the active alliance leaders, on the same page about how important it is when it comes to alliance power balancing and trying to come up with a good game plan that everyone can get on board with would probably be the second biggest thing that you can do. And the third most important thing is that you just have to recruit, right? You have to get new blood coming into the server. That's never going to change. Player drop off is always going to be existent, and it's never going to go away. So the only way you really can combat that is by recruiting new players to come to the server. So those are a few of my solution tips, and I really would love to hear from you guys, the community, on what you think about, are these things you notice, right? Were you playing in a server in a kingdom? Are you playing in one now? Or you've been there since day one? And after maybe watching this video, unless you already noticed it yourself, that you saw your kingdom, your server trending in that direction, where you saw kind of these signs of mega alliance or two mega alliances being formed that were just a cut above the rest, and maybe explain, show me how you saw it play out. Or maybe you're in a kingdom or a server that literally is that. Like you have one and or maybe two mega alliances, and it's pretty much like scraps or barely nothing for the remaining active alliances. And is that something that you are just okay with? Have you been playing there for a while? Are you migrating out? Have you already migrated out? Was it because of that, and why? If not, something else. Right? Let me know anything and everything you guys are thinking in those comments down below. That's it from me. As always, until next time, we will catch y'all later.